July 25, 1898. The quiet town of Guanica on the southern coast of Puerto Rico. As dawn broke, the town's residents witnessed an unprecedented scene. Rows of gray American warships appeared on the horizon. Shortly after, led by General Nelson A. Miles, about 3,300 American soldiers landed on the island's soil. Thus began a new chapter in America's war against Spain, the American invasion of the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico. But the nature of this invasion was strange. Spanish resistance here was weak and scattered. Many ordinary Puerto Ricans did not see the Americans as enemies. Rather, fed up with 4 centuries of Spain's neglect and harsh rule, many saw the Americans as liberators. General Miles himself, upon stepping onto the island, issued a proclamation stating, "We have not come as your enemies. We have come to save you and your property from the oppression of Spanish rule, and to bring you the liberties and blessings of our government." These words were a beacon of hope. Puerto Ricans thought they were perhaps walking the path to independence, just like Cuba. They thought that holding America's hand, they would achieve self-rule or full independence, for which they had been struggling for decades. But history had written a completely different fate for them. The liberators who brought promises of freedom and democracy spread a net of a new, more complex colonial rule. Puerto Rico was freed from Spain's hand, true. But it could not become independent. It turned into an unresolved property of America, whose residents are neither American nor independent. Prisoners even today in a strange music identity crisis. How did this promise of liberation turn into a chain of a new, more complex subjugation? Why did Puerto Rico, which was about to be free from one colonial power, turn into a permanent colony of America? And through exactly what process did America steal the island's dream of independence? We will try to go deep into these historical and political debates in today's episode of Adiopanto. In 1493, Christopher Columbus reached this island on his second expedition and named it San Juan Bautista. Later, Spanish colonists started calling the island Puerto Rico, or Rich Port. During Spanish rule, Puerto Rico's importance was mainly strategic. It was the gateway to the Spanish Empire in the Caribbean and a key military base. By building huge forts in cities like San Juan, Spain protected its naval fleets and treasure fleets from attacks by pirates and other European powers. But despite its strategic importance, Puerto Rico was largely neglected by Spain economically. It didn't have vast stores of sugar like Cuba or silver like Mexico. As a result, the island remained poor and underdeveloped compared to Spain's other colonies. The economy here was mainly dependent on coffee, sugar, and tobacco cultivation, which was concentrated in the hands of a handful of Spanish landowners and businessmen. During this long period, the indigenous Taino population of the island was almost wiped out by various diseases brought by the colonists and oppression, and their place was taken by slaves brought from Africa. Through these 4 centuries of rule, exploitation, and neglect, a distinct Puerto Rican identity slowly began to form. In the 19th century, when the wave of independence hit other parts of Latin America, its heat reached Puerto Rico too. In 1868, under the leadership of Ramón Emeterio Betances, an armed rebellion known as Grito de Lares, or the Cry of Lares, took place. Although Spain quickly suppressed this rebellion, it was Puerto Rico's first organized struggle for independence. Over time, it became a powerful symbol of nationalism. Since then, Puerto Ricans chose the path of political bargaining instead of armed struggle for independence. Leaders like Luis Muñoz Rivera continued to demand greater self-rule from Spain. The result of their peaceful movement lasting decades was finally obtained at the very end of the 19th century, 1897. Weakened by the pressure of the ongoing War of Independence in Cuba and the fear of a potential American intervention, Spain took a historic step to keep Puerto Rico quiet. They granted Puerto Rico a charter of autonomy. According to this charter, Puerto Rico gained the right to its own bicameral parliament, a responsible cabinet, and the right to appoint consuls with Spain worldwide. They were also given the power to determine their own currency, postal system, and tariffs. This was roughly equivalent to a British dominion, like Canada or Australia. In February 1898, Puerto Rico's first autonomous government took the oath. After nearly 400 years of colonial rule, Puerto Ricans had achieved the power to determine their own fate for the first time. The sun of independence was on the horizon. But they did not know that within just a few months, a new storm was coming from the other side of the Caribbean Sea that would completely crush this hard-earned autonomy. In the spring of 1898, relations between America and Spain reached a boiling point, centering on Cuba's War of Independence. The mysterious explosion of the U.S. warship USS Maine in Havana Harbor and the anti-Spain propaganda by American media made war inevitable. Although the main focal point of this war was Cuba, the eyes of American policymakers were on Puerto Rico from the start. To the American imperialist camp, Puerto Rico was an invaluable strategic asset. Inspired by the theories of naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan, leaders like Theodore Roosevelt believed that for America to be a world power, it must build a powerful navy and a network of naval bases worldwide. Puerto Rico was the key to controlling the Caribbean Sea. On one hand, it could be an ideal coaling station and repair center for the American Navy. On the other, its importance for protecting the entrance to the canal that would be dug in Panama in the future was immense. There were economic reasons behind this too. America's powerful sugar trust, or sugar business groups, saw vast potential for sugarcane cultivation in Puerto Rico's fertile lands. The influence of sugar businessmen to further secure their domestic market was also massive. Therefore, even though the war started in the name of Cuba's independence, capturing Puerto Rico was a pre-planned goal of America. After the war began, American forces quickly defeated Spain in Cuba and the Philippines. Right after that, their eyes fell on Puerto Rico. On July 25, 1898, American soldiers led by General Nelson Miles landed at Guanica Port in southwestern Puerto Rico. There was a strategic reason for choosing this location too. The capital San Juan was protected by forts. Attacking there directly carried the possibility of heavy casualties. Guanica was unguarded, and anti-Spain sentiment among the local population was also strong. General Miles tried to win the hearts of the island's people according to his promise. In his proclamation, he said Americans had come to overthrow tyrannical rulers and bring the blessings of democracy and justice. Many Puerto Ricans, who were tired of Spain's central rule and economic neglect, believed this promise. They thought a democratic country like America could not impose colonial rule on them. So, with almost no resistance, American soldiers advanced toward the capital. In a brief campaign of just 3 weeks, most of the island came under American control, and on August 12th, a ceasefire agreement was signed. The war ended. For Puerto Ricans, it was then a moment of hope and waiting. They thought this time there would be a seat for them too at the table discussing their fate. After the war ended, representatives of victorious America and defeated Spain gathered in Paris for peace talks. This discussion, lasting from October to December 1898, is one of the saddest chapters in Puerto Rico's history. At the table where their future was being determined, there was no place for any Puerto Rican representative. Taking their opinion was far off. Their very existence was completely ignored. In this discussion, Spain had no opportunity to bargain. They were destitute from the war. They had no way open but to accept the conditions given by America. America's demand was clear. Cuba must be given independence, though it would remain within America's sphere of influence. and Guam and Puerto Rico must be handed over directly to America. Although there was some debate regarding the Philippines, in the end, that too came under American possession in exchange for $20 million. To know the details of how America captured the Philippines, you can watch this video by Adiopanto. Link in the description. On December 10, 1898, the Treaty of Paris was signed. According to Article 9 of this treaty, Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States. There was a sentence in the treaty that threw Puerto Rico's future into a legal void. The civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress. That is, the complete power to determine what the civil rights and political status of Puerto Rico's people would be was given to the American Congress. Through this single line, the right to self-determination of the Puerto Rican people was completely taken away. A nation that had achieved a historic charter of autonomy from Spain just a few months ago turned overnight into a property of America, which had no constitutional identity or rights. Their hard-earned parliament was dissolved. Their government was cancelled. They turned from autonomous citizens of Spain into subjects of America without rights. This treaty was an ultimate betrayal for Puerto Ricans. They thought Americans had come to liberate them. But in reality, Americans had come to establish a new, more powerful colonial rule. The Treaty of Paris was the legal document of that colonialism, where an entire nation was handed over from one empire to another without their consent. From the Puerto Rican perspective, this was tantamount to shamelessly stealing their political future. After the Treaty of Paris, Puerto Rico came under direct American rule. For the first 2 years, the island was under direct American military control, which was a type of military occupation. Then, the American Congress started the work of creating a civil administration system for Puerto Rico. Through this process, Puerto Rico was imprisoned in a new legal and economic cage that controls their fate even today. The first step of this new colonial structure was the Foraker Act of 1900. This act established a civil government for Puerto Rico, but its structure was completely undemocratic and colonial. Under this law, the island's governor and his 11-member executive council, which played the role of both the cabinet and the upper house of parliament, were appointed directly by the President of the United States. Most members of this council were American. That is, the main power of all executive and legislative enactment on the island was in Washington's hands. Meanwhile, Puerto Ricans were given the right to elect a 35-member House of Delegates, or lower house, but any law passed by them was subject to the governor's veto, and they could not stop laws passed by the governor or executive council. This was essentially a farce of limited democracy. The most important matter is that the Foraker Act did not grant U.S. citizenship to Puerto Ricans. Instead, they became holders of a new strange legal identity called citizens of Puerto Rico. They were under America's protection, but they had no constitutional rights. Again, this law established free trade between Puerto Rico and America. As a result, American corporations, especially sugar-producing companies, bought up vast lands of the island, taking advantage of tax benefits. Puerto Rico's coffee-based economy quickly transformed into a sugar-based economy. Local farmers lost their lands and turned into day laborers for American companies. Puerto Rico's economy was planned and restructured for America's interest. When questions arose about the legality of this legal structure, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered several landmark verdicts starting from 1901, known in history as the Insular Cases. The main question of these cases was, does the Constitution follow the flag? That is, will the people of a place where America's flag flies automatically receive all rights under the U.S. Constitution? The Supreme Court's answer was no. At that time, the court created a new legal concept. America controls two types of regions or territories: incorporated territory which is on the path to becoming a state in the future, like Alaska or Hawaii, and unincorporated territory, which belongs to America but is not part of it. Puerto Rico was thrown into this second category. The meaning stood that although the people of Puerto Rico were under American sovereignty, they would not receive full rights under the U.S. Constitution, such as the right to vote in presidential elections or representation in Congress. Congress could make any law for them, which might not be applicable to U.S. citizens. These verdicts legally established Puerto Rico's second-class status. A major change in this structure came through the Jones Act of 1917. This law granted U.S. citizenship to Puerto Ricans. There were more strategic reasons than humanitarian ones behind this. America was then preparing to enter World War I, and they needed to recruit soldiers from Puerto Rico. It was easy to include them in the army by granting citizenship. This law also created an elected Senate, which gave Puerto Ricans more power in their legislation. But the supreme power, i.e., the veto power, still remained in the hands of the U.S. appointed governor. Therefore, even after getting citizenship, Puerto Rico politically remained a colony. In the mid-20th century, another major change came to Puerto Rico's political and economic structure. Under the leadership of Luis Muñoz Marin, the island's first elected governor, an ambitious economic program named Operation Bootstrap began in the 1950s. Its goal was to transform the island from an agriculture-based economy to an industry-based economy. Huge tax breaks were given to American companies to set up factories in Puerto Rico. As a result, rapid industrialization occurred. Music, people's income increased, and the standard of living improved. But it had a dark side too. Industrialization destroyed the agricultural system. As a result, millions of Puerto Ricans were forced to migrate to New York and other American cities in search of work. The island's economy became completely dependent on American corporations and the American market. Parallel to this economic change, in 1952, Puerto Rico gained a new political status. They created their own constitution, music, and gained recognition as Estado Libre Asociado, or Free Associated State, which is known in English as the Commonwealth. America and internationally, this was presented as an example of the end of colonialism, where Puerto Rico voluntarily established a special relationship with America. But, in reality, this Commonwealth status was merely a sweet coating over colonialism. According to the U.S. Congress's Territory Clause, ultimate sovereignty over Puerto Rico was still in the hands of Congress. Congress could cancel Puerto Rico's constitution or laws at any time if it wanted. So, the name Free Associated State is nothing but a legal illusion. This unresolved and vague political status has deeply divided Puerto Rico's society. For example, one side wants Puerto Rico to turn into the 51st state of America. As a result, they would get full representation in the U.S. Congress, like 2 senators and several congressmen, the right to vote in presidential elections, and equal benefits in medical and other federal programs as the states. In recent referendums, this alternative received the most votes, although there is debate about the participation rate. Again, another group wants full sovereignty for Puerto Rico. This is historically the ideal of nationalist leaders like Pedro Albizu Campos. However, due to fear of economic uncertainty, its public support is currently the lowest, so to speak. Meanwhile, another party wants to maintain the current free associated system or improve it further, where they would enjoy even more autonomy while keeping a special relationship with America. Amidst this political debate, Puerto Rico has fallen into an extreme economic crisis in the 21st century. An economic recession lasting over a decade, a massive debt of $72 billion, and government mismanagement have bankrupted the island. In response, in 2016, the U.S. Congress passed the PROMESA Act, creating an unelected federal board that completely controls the island is economy and budget. This is a naked expression of Puerto Rico's colonial status. The devastating strike of Hurricane Maria in 2017 and Washington's slow and insufficient relief aid have made the reality of their helplessness and being second-class citizens even clearer to the island's people. After a long struggle against Spanish colonial rule, Puerto Rico was walking the path from autonomy to independence. But in 1898, America snatched away their newly acquired autonomy. Through the Treaty of Paris, their fate was determined in their absence. Then, through legal frameworks like the Foraker Act, Insular Cases, and Jones Act, they were bound in chains of a permanent political and economic subjugation. Finally, the Commonwealth status was just a beautiful wrapper put over that subjugation. Puerto Rico's story is one of the shameful chapters of American history. The country that was born fighting against colonialism did not hesitate to turn into a colonial power itself when necessary. The people of Puerto Rico are U.S. citizens today, but they do not have full democratic rights. They are part of America, but not completely of America. After more than 126 years, Puerto Rico's political status remains unresolved today, which remains a living question mark on America's democracy and promises.